देखो भाई ये तुसी देखो आगे की नहीं
एसी ऑन कर दिया, ऑन करना है, एसी ऑन करके फिर रहता है। क्या हो गया? हेलो, हेलो,
the participants at other centers would join, let them join. So I am Dr. Paramjit Tulsi. I am presently heading the Department of Education and Education Management at NITTTR and also have been assigned additional duty of Dean Research and Development. And I have been working in this institute since 1986 and contributing to 5 major activities undertaken by the institute, that is education and training, curriculum development, research and development, instructional material and development, and extension and consultancy services. With this brief introduction, let's now start the previous session. You had been given an orientation with respect to what is communication, what is the process of communication, and what is the significant importance of communication. In this particular session, I'm going to focus on classroom communication rather than general communication. And you can read through, you can never succeed with people without mutual trust and understanding. Effective communication skills could judge the difference between success and failure. Now, when we talk in terms of communication, the people who are effective communicators, they experience success earlier than those who are less effective communicators. And in today's world, your success depends upon the communication skills you possess. As rightly said by Mr. P.K. Singla, that 80% of our waking time goes to communication. When we say 80% of our time goes to communication, that means either we are speaking, listening, reading, or writing. And the 20% time which is not included here, that is where you are communicating to yourself. So intra-communication takes place, interpersonal communication takes place, or you are talking to a very large group. So the third category, where there is only one-way communication and opportunity for feedback is limited, that refers to a personal communication. And rightly said by my colleague that the 80% of time we spend on communication, 45% goes to listening, 30% to speaking, 16% to reading, and 9% to writing. It depends upon the job responsibilities and activities of a person that determine how much time he or she will spend on each activity. As a teacher, when I'm in a class, most of the time I'm busy in listening and speaking. And most of the teachers, they indulge in speaking rather than listening. And students, most of the time, they are listening and then they enter into speaking. As a salesperson also, he is into listening and speaking. PBX operator again into listening and speaking. But a software engineer is more into reading and writing. And if you take the case of technology you use, it also determines how much time would you spend. Nowadays, when we use mobile phones, the people who are accustomed to sending call messages, they are into listening and speaking. The people who are into SMS writing, so they are more into writing and reading. So technology also determines how much time would you spend on each one of these skills. And communication, because he has already given you, it is sharing of meaning. I don't try to define it as transfer of message, transfer of ideas, unless and until the receiver interprets the message as intended by the sender of the message, communication is not complete. And communication, when we say is sharing of meaning, each word has two different meanings. Denotative meaning refers to the standard meaning of the word, and connotative meaning refers to the meaning you attached based upon your experience. And normally, when we say if both the denotative and connotative meaning attached by the receiver is the similar one attached by the sender, then communication is effective, right? So when I say boss, the denotative meaning, the standard meaning of boss is immediate, superior. But many people would attach negative connotation to the word boss. They say a person who's autocratic, who takes his own decision, who doesn't listen to others, who dictates, right? So the connotative meaning is different than the standard meaning of the word boss, that is immediate, superior. So both denotative and connotative meaning has to be the same for the receiver and the sender. But communication is such a process which breaks down. There are not many instances where the communication breaks down due to barriers in communication and it becomes ineffective. But as a teacher, it is the role of the teacher to make the communication effective. And the research in the area of communication clearly indicates that greater the effectiveness of communication, higher are the chances, or higher is the effectiveness of communication, greater are the chances that instructional objectives will be achieved. So in this session, we are going to deal with, you have already been given the orientation with respect to the process of communication. May I know from the house, what are the different elements in the process of communication? Yes? Anyone who would like to speak out? What are the various elements in the process of communication? Anyone from any one of the centers would like to speak? What are the elements in the process of communication? Yes? Can we listen to the audience, please? Okay, friends, if not, the obvious reply is the sender. You might have come across two words in communication. One is source, another is sender. May I know what is the difference between source and sender? Yes. सोर्स और सेंडर में क्या अंतर है? Okay. Now in communication, when we say the source is a person, then he is referred to as a sender. Otherwise, the person or anything which originates the idea is referred to as source. And here, if the book is source of information, it gives you idea. Book is a source. It cannot be referred to as a sender. A video film which conveys a message is also referred to as source. So sender is a person who designs the message and transmits the message and receives the feedback. Receiver is a person who tries to interpret the message and derives meaning out of the message. Message is another important component in the process of communication, and message consists of verbal and non-verbal symbols. Now, the way I'm trying to communicate, I'm trying to use a language. So I'm trying to convey a verbal message to the audience. But say, for example, I say, bye. I just only don't speak, but wave my hand. It is a non-verbal message. Maintain silence or be silent. So if I put my finger on my lips, it conveys the meaning. Or I say, come here. And these are non-verbal messages. Or I show a diagram which is labeled. It's a combination of verbal and non-verbal messages. So message is combination of verbal and non-verbal symbols. Then we have in the process of communication an element of encoding. Encoding, the people from electronics must be knowing that encoding is the process of selecting symbols. Now, when I say I want to ask your name, I can either select verbal message, that is, I select verbal symbol, I say, what is your name? Or I can simply say, thank you. So that means without using a language, you can pose the same question with gestures. And encoding is simply selecting appropriate symbols to convert the idea into a message which will be transferred to the receiver. So it's a process of selecting symbols for transferring the message to the receiver. This is referred to as the process of encoding. In the process of communication, we use different types of channels to transmit the message to the receiver. And you can use audio channel. When you make use of the telephone, you make use of the radio, it is you are using audio channel. There can be visual channel for transmitting the information. That is, you use a slide, you use a poster, you show a diagram, you show an animation, and you are using the visual channel of communication. You can also use a combination of audio-visual channel. That means you are using a video film, you are showing a multimedia package where you have the verbal messages, you have the non-verbal messages, there are certain sound effects, there are certain motion effects, and so on. So a combination of audio-visual channel tries to capitalize on the various senses of the individual. So a teacher, when makes use of print material, it is also under the visual channel, because you can see the words, you can read through, you can understand the message. And a person uses the graphic medium, which may be the visual channel, or it may be combination of audio visual channel if you're trying to use graphics with audio, right? So channels, you make use of number of media. That means you can use print material, the books, the journals, the instructional sheets, the lab manuals, and so on. You can make use of graphic material where you use charts, graphs, diagrams. Then you can use slides, you can use posters, you can use pictures. Then you can use the computer assisted instruction packages. Then you can use the video films, which is a combination of audio video. You can use the models, mock-ups, simulators. You can use the real things to transfer the message. Say for example, I as a teacher want to make use of what are the various parts of the lathe machine. So I carry a lathe machine and I show the actual components of lathe machine. That is also a channel of communication where you are trying to communicate the message, so you are using certain media. Then decoding. Decoding is carried out by the receiver, and decoding refers to interpreting the incoming symbols, whether verbal or non-verbal. Now when I say you interpret, why? You are seeing of somebody. Or when I said this, you said come here. That means you are inviting somebody to come near to you, right? Or when I said this, you said be silent or keep silence. This is the signal you are giving, you are trying to interpret, right? But if I said this, yes, wow. So you can interpret the symbol and you can derive the meaning. Or when I'm using a language which is comprehensible to you, you are able to interpret it and understand the message which I want to convey to you. So decoding is the process of interpreting the verbal and non-verbal symbol. Feedback is very important component in the process of communication. Because unless and until you receive feedback from the receiver, You cannot design your subsequent messages. Say, for example, I want to ask, okay, what have you understood by three-phase motor? What do you understand by three-phase motor? Now, this is a question which I posed in the class. I don't get a reply from my students. That gives me feedback. Yes, they have not understood the concept. I either need to explain it again or I need to elaborate it, what the explanation which I have built. So the subsequent message is dependent upon the feedback we try to receive from our receivers. And without feedback, the process of communication remains as one-way communication. It is not two-way communication. So a two-way communication is where there is every opportunity for feedback, and both the teacher and the student, they are providing feedback to each other. Then the process of communication has an element of noise. Noise is anything which hinders the process of communication. Now, say for example, you are sitting here in the ETV studio. There is hum of the air conditioner, and you are sitting nearer to the air conditioner. That hum of the air conditioner causes a problem to you because you are not able to concentrate on the message. Somebody coming into the studio and banging the door behind will create a noise, and your attention may be diverted to what has happened, who has entered the ETV studio, and you are diverting from the teacher interaction which is taking place in the classroom situation. Or person sitting next to you, they start talking to each other and you are disturbed. That is again a noise which has been created in the classroom situation. Your classroom is at such a place that there is lot of traffic going outside, and you are listening to the horns of the trucks, the buses, the cars, as it happens in Government Polytechnic Ambala City. So what you are getting is that all the time you are distracted by the horns of trucks, horns of buses, horns of cars, or your institution is very near to the airport and the aircraft passes over the building and you get that noise, and that is a distraction which is caused by external happening. So this is what is referred to as external noise. But there can also be a noise element present within the sender of the message and the receiver of the message. Say for example, you are here for attending the program and you have taken up 5 hours journey in the morning. You are tired. You are not in the mood to pay 100% attention, or you are not able to pay 100% attention to the classroom interaction. This is an internal noise. Or say for example, you are here but you have a headache. You are not able to sit through, not able to concentrate on. This is internal noise. Or it can happen to the person who is sending the message. The teacher himself or herself is not well. He is not well, he is not able to transact, he is not able to interact properly. He is in a hurry to finish the subject matter. He is not in a mood to take feedback from the student. So your communication gets adversely affected if there is an element of internal noise either within the teacher or the receiver of the message. So there can be external noise, there can be internal noise in the process of communication. And every communication takes place in a context. And when I say context, there can be 4 types of context. The very first question comes to your mind is where the communication is taking place. This is referred to as physical context. Is it in the classroom? Is it in the playground? Is it in the laboratory? Is it in the home? Is it in the office room of the teacher? Or is it in the director's room? Do you think the place where the communication is taking place has any effect on the nature and content of communication? Yes. Do you think there is an effect of the place of communication on the nature and content of communication? Yes. Yes or no? आप कह रहे हो जरूरी नहीं है. Now say for example, I am talking to my student in the classroom. The classroom communication would be structured, planned, organized. I am talking to my student in the playground. The nature and content of communication would vary. I'm not going to teach any subject to the student in the playground. I can laugh with him, I can run with him, I can sit with him, and that is the beauty of the place where the communication is taking place. But in the classroom, I cannot have the similar kind of behavior, the similar kind of communication. The communication in the playground will be very informal, but in the classroom, it will be very formal communication. Think of how I interact with my mother, father, brother, sister, children. It is very informal communication. You can take up any topic, there may not be any coherence, you can continue communicating with to your family members, but you cannot have that kind of communication in the classroom. It is again going to be very formal. Now, when you are in the office of your principal, the nature and content of communication would differ. Very different. बिल्कुल. So physical, where the communication is taking place, makes a difference to the nature and content of communication. Then social context. Social context refers to what is the status hierarchy of the people who are involved in the process of communication. Are you talking to your students? Are you talking to your head of the department? Are you talking to the principal of the institution? Are you talking to the vice chancellor of the university? The greater the difference or the gap between the status positions, the more formal will be the communication. A teacher talking to a teacher, a colleague, very informal, open. But when the teacher talks to the head of department, the degree of formality increases. When you talk to the director or principal of the institution, you become more formal. If you have to talk to the vice chancellor of the university, the degree of formality will be high. High. You become utterly humble. You speak only what is desired of you or required of you, and your communication is very structured, planned. But when talking to colleague, it is informal. So what kind of social status exists or social hierarchy exists between the sender and the receiver, that also affects the nature and content of communication. Then comes psychological context. When I say psychological context, it refers to the feelings that exist within the sender and the receiver. Now, think of a situation when you entered into teaching profession and you had to take a very first class. Were you afraid or were you confident? Yes, ma'am. थोड़ी सी nervous थी. If you were little bit nervous, did it affect your communication in any way? क्या हुआ था? Okay, that's right. When you are afraid of a situation or you are nervous or the level of anxiety is very high, then you fail to find appropriate words. You make mistakes, which may be grammatical mistakes, you make technical mistakes, and you are not able to explain in detail. Your rate of delivery may become very fast or very slow if you are really under stress, under anxiety, or you are feeling nervous in a given situation. And you are not able to maintain eye contact with the people who are sitting in front of you. So you lose confidence if you are under stress, under anxiety. And if you feel confident, you say, okay, this is a situation where all known people are there. You feel very confident. In that situation, you are very open in your communication. You invite interaction, you invite feedback, you provide the feedback, you even create humor in such a situation. But under stress, under anxiety, you can't think of creating a humor in the class. So the feeling, whether you feel that there is a feeling of love, affection, security in the situation, then you are very open in the communication. But if you think it is a very fearful situation, you are afraid of going to the situation, then you are very, very structured, very formal in your communication. Then comes temporal context. There is always a right time to say the things. And many a times in our lifetime, we listen to the words, it is not the time to discuss this issue. Can we take up this issue little later? We'll talk about it later. These are the things which we listen in our day-to-day life. Or say, you have discussing a topic in the class, and suddenly a student stands up, talks about, ma'am, the food is not good in the mess. We are not able to satisfy ourselves. And you tell him, better, we'll talk about the food after the class, not now. That means the right time is not there to discuss about the quality of food in the classroom situation. Or a student tries to uh, divert from the topic and bring in an issue of, okay, the football match which happened yesterday. So he tries to give you the details of the football. You say, oh, stop it, we'll discuss after the class. So there is a time to take up every issue. And likewise, I normally give an example of how many of you would like to have a bed tea. And say, for example, you get up early in the morning and your wife comes with a list. These are the things which you must bring when you come back home and see the situation flares up. And you say, you are looking for a cup of tea and you're giving me a list, and unnecessarily the communication breakdowns takes place, or there's a quarrel which takes place within the two individuals. So physical, social, psychological, and temporal context interact among themselves to determine the nature and content of communication. That is, where the communication is taking place, what are the social hierarchy exists, that what kind of social hierarchy exists between the sender and receiver, what feelings exist within the sender and receiver, and at what time the communication is taking place, all combined together determine the nature and content of communication. And just one more example I would like to give for the temporal, that in all institutions, you have theory classes scheduled in morning, practical classes scheduled in the afternoon. The reason is, when the students are fresh, they are able to concentrate on what is being said. They can listen to. But in the afternoon, they have undergone a study for 4 hours. Then they have taken the food. So you engage them in activity where deliberate attention, concentration is not required. When you engross in an activity, you forget about the timings. So there is no tiredness when you're doing certain tasks and activities. Now we move on to, if these are the elements, what is the relationship among these elements? So have a quick look at, this is a simple way of putting the process of communication in place. That is, you have a sender who is involved in the process of encoding, selecting symbols. And then the message is designed, which consists of verbal and non-verbal symbol. Message is sent through a channel, audio, video, or audio, visual, and audio, visual. And the message is received by the receiver. He tries to interpret the message, derive the meaning out of the verbal and non-verbal symbols, and sends a feedback in the form of response to the sender, and the subsequent messages are designed by the sender based upon the feedback received from the receiver. There can be an element of noise in the sender, in the receiver, in the channel, or in the learning environment. And this is what in brief is referred to as the process of communication. Or in other words, you can define the process that communication is a process of sending and receiving messages through a channel with some noise and some effect. Effect means change in behavior of the receiver, and with opportunity for feedback. This is what normally we define the process of communication. You can have a copy of this later on, so don't note down. Then the same thing can be translated into the classroom communication. And when we say classroom communication, it passes through certain stages. And let me ask from the audience here, when you go to the class and teach a particular topic, what are the steps which you follow? Yes, नरेश जी, बैठ के बोलिए, बैठ के, थोड़ा सा ऊंची, नहीं, क्लास में जाने से पहले आप कुछ करते हैं? हाँ जी, the steps which you follow. कहाँ से पता चलता है आज कौन सा लेक्चर पढ़ाना? शेड्यूल होता है. शेड्यूल कहाँ से बनता है? सिलेबस से. ओके. फिर तैयार करने के लिए क्या करते हैं? ओके, बुक से, नेट से आप मटेरियल इकट्ठा करते हो, फिर स्ट्रक्चर बनाते हो, फिर डिलीवर करने के लिए क्या चैनल्स का प्रयोग करते हैं? कुछ चैनल्स यूज करते हो, वो डिजाइन के समय यूज करते. थैंक यू वेरी मच. सो द वेरी फर्स्ट स्टेज in the classroom communication is formulation of message, and the basis for formulation of message is the syllabus for a particular subject, because syllabus delineates the breadth and scope of the topic. So you go to the syllabus and see, if I'm going to teach say the engines, what are the things which I'm going to cover up in that, and what is the scope where I have to delimit the topic for this particular class. Then on the basis of the breadth and scope delineated, you try to go to the library, you refer to your personal books, you look up to the journals which are there, you also refer to the net as rightly said, and you try to collect information from various sources. But that information is not used as such. You try to sift, adapt the message according to the requirements of the syllabus and according to the requirements of your student. And then you try to give a structure, a sequence to the various elements in that topic. In what sequence would you teach, how much elaboration you try to determine that and give a structure. And you are trying to then, once you have tried to finalize the message, you try to select symbols. Are you going to use verbal symbols? Are you going to use a non-verbal symbol? Are you going to show them any animation? Are you going to show them any simulation? Are you going to use only the textual material when dealing with, you are using language? So you try to select symbols for transmission of the message to your students, and then transmission of message. So you select a channel. You are going to the class, interacting with the student, you club with PowerPoint presentation, or you have a video film on the topic. You say to your students, okay, this is the list of the question to which you should find an answer to after the viewing of the video film. And you show the video film, they try to give answers to the question you have given to them. Then there is a group discussion that follows in the class. So you try to select how are you going to transmit. You yourself going to interact. Are you going to give them a self-learning material to the student for independent study? Are you going to give them the task which they are going to perform and then they are going to learn the topic? Or are you going to use a problem-based learning where you have created a problem and then they are trying to learn the method? So transmission of messages, whatever message you have designed, the symbols you have selected, on the basis of the symbol, you try to select a channel of transmission of message. Then decoding of the message is done by the student. And decoding is interpreting and then feedback. When you have covered a sizable chunk of information in the class, you pose questions on that topic, on the part you have covered to your student. You have dealt with one first order differential equation. You now give a numerical to the student and ask them to solve that. So you get a feedback by asking oral questions, by giving them tasks, by giving them problem solving, and you try to obtain the feedback whether they have rightly understood or they have not. And on the basis of the feedback, again you design and transmit the subsequent messages. And here you can see that in the classroom, the teacher is the primary sender of the message. And he tries to formulate the message, encode the message, then he tries to transmit, and the student is able to decode the message and provide feedback to the sender of the message. But the story doesn't end here. It is interactive process. At times, the student who is the receiver of the message also acts as a sender of the message. When a student tries to pose a question, when student tries to clarify a doubt, when student wants to supplement the information given by the teacher, he is trying to formulate a message, he is trying to encode the message, select symbol, he is trying to transmit the message, and the teacher is the one who tries to decode the message and provide feedback to the student. So there is a role reversal that takes place within the classroom situation, and this is, according to Cole and Shan, is referred to as interactive model of classroom communication, where there is interaction, there is role reversal between the teacher and the student. The teacher becomes the receiver, the student becomes the sender of the message. I hope this is clear. Any question so far? Okay. Now we move on to what are the factors that affect classroom communication? Any idea? Okay. 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 So that means there are few factors which pertain to the student. Are there any factors related to the teacher that affects the effectiveness of communication? Yes. Okay. Fine. Fine. So that means there are certain factors related to the teacher. There are certain factors which are related to the students that can affect the effectiveness of communication. In addition to that, how the message has been designed, organized, structured, planned, even that can have effect on the effectiveness of communication. Mr. Singha in the beginning has very rightly said, message ought to be structured, designed appropriately. Only then it will yield the desired effect on the student. So message related factors are there. Methods and media related factors are there, and there is environment in which communication is taking place. So what kind of learning environment exists within the classroom So 5 different types of factors can affect the classroom communication. So I'll be dealing with each one of these in little greater details. Coming to the very first one, you can see the teacher related factors. The very first thing is what kind of self concept the teacher brings to the classroom. The teachers who have very unrealistic self concept. Sometimes we have feeling or perception about our own self. We think we know all, but maybe we don't know anything, right? Or we go with the notion that my behavior is ideal. This is the self-concept, right? I'm very good at everything, right? This is a self-concept, which may be unrealistic. So if I go with this notion, I'm going to adopt an autocratic or authoritarian style of interaction. I will not allow my students to speak in the class, and I'll continue with it. Whatever I say is right. This is the kind of feeling I have about myself. Isn't it? It happens. Opposite to this is, I have a very low self-concept. I say, I know nothing. I have nothing to contribute. I have no strengths. Very low self-concept of myself. So I go half dead in the class. I deal with the topic. I'm not motivated. That is very obnoxious. My student also gets demotivated by looking at me. The way I'm dealing, there's no enthusiasm, there's no motivation to teach the topic. And I speak at a very low pace, low volume. That will have very adverse effect on the communication. Second thing is, what do I think? What are my perceptions about the world? अब देखिए, a teacher going to the class and making an announcement, you are going to waste your 4 years by studying electrical engineering. Now, a teacher who's going to teach electrical engineering making this statement, that means that person has very, what kind of pessimistic? Is very pessimistic that after 4 years, the students will not get anywhere. But the same teacher, if tries to have a positive and is very optimist that after 4 years, the student will be able to acquire this knowledge and skill and they'll be able to contribute effectively to the world of work, sounds very different from the teacher who is pessimistic. And a teacher who is not optimistic about teaching his own subject, अगर आप याद करिए mathematics, applied mathematics, क्या करोगे इसको पढ़ के? Why have you opted for mathematics? And this kind of, when the questions are raised by the teacher who is teaching, the communication becomes ineffective. You create unfavorable attitude among your students. But if you talk about very optimistically about the subject, about the world, about the environment in which the student is going to be after 4 years, then your communication is very, very effective and students try to develop a positive attitude towards you, towards the subject, towards the world in which they are likely to live in. So the self-concept of the teacher and the perception about the world around, they are very important factors in determining the effectiveness of communication. Then develop proficiency in the subject matter. There is no substitute for having mastery over the subject matter. Because a teacher who is going to achieve certain desired objectives needs to possess knowledge of that topic. And you must have thorough knowledge of the various elements of that topic. Only then you will be able to explain, elaborate, give examples, relate the subject to other subject, relate the topic to other topics, relate the subject to other disciplines, and tell where this subject is going to be applied. And your fluency would be there only if you have thorough knowledge of your subject matter. And it is said that in today's context, where knowledge is changing very rapidly, the shelf value of the degrees is declining very fast. Computer less than 1 year, electrical less than 2 years, civil engineering 5 years, dentistry 10 years, architecture 15 years. So if this is the kind of shelf value of the degrees, depending upon the subject you teach, you need to remain current in your subject matter. And you need to acquire the latest knowledge in your own subject area. Only then you establish your credibility. If I go as a teacher in the class, I teach wrong things to my student, my credibility goes down. So students doesn't have faith in me. So if they don't have faith in me, they'll not pay attention to the interaction that takes place in the class. They'll be better dependent upon the books, the other sources of information. They are only there, they are physically present, but mentally absent. So I need to create a situation where I prove my credibility by giving them the latest knowledge in the field, giving them the current developments that have taken place in the subject, and then I satisfy my students and achieve the objectives. Next is a teacher who is able to pitch the topic or the communication to the level of the learner remains effective. Without having the knowledge of who is my audience or who are my learners, what have they already learned, what they already know, what is their previous attainments, whether they are interested in what I am going to teach, whether they are motivated to listen to me, what is their areas of interest. If I don't know about this, are they men, are they males, females, are they from rural area, urban area? Understand the learner, how they learn, whether they would prefer independent activities, whether they would prefer activities in groups. If I gather some information about my learners, whether they are proficient in English, whether they are proficient in Hindi, whether they are proficient in other language, if I know all this, I can pitch my lesson to the level of the learner. And if you are able to do that, then your communication remains effective. So a teacher, if lacks the understanding about the learners, will never be able to satisfy the learner. So try to gather this information from the application performer which the student fills in. Try to interact with the student informally. Try to gather as much information about your students before entering the class so that you are able to design the messages and deliver the messages according to the level of your learning. अजी आज आपके बच्चे अगर आपको बोलते हैं use a mixed language, make sure that you try to give explanation in Hindi, Punjabi or any other language, but you use the technical terminology. You as a teacher are the facilitator and you are not there to impress them with your mastery over the language. So understanding of learner by the teacher is another factor that is going to determine the effectiveness of classroom communication. The teacher, because communication is all pervasive. You use it in personal life, you use it in social life, you use it in work life, and likewise, if you are in the class, you are communicating. You are in the lab, you are communicating. When you are guiding your students in project work, you are communicating. So a teacher needs to possess excellent communication skills, both verbal and non-verbal. Because Verbal and non-verbal skills are used by all of us in communication. And that I'm going to engage another session on oral communication, where I'll be going into the nitty-gritty of how can we use verbal and non-verbal skill, and how can we hone our verbal and non-verbal skills. So I skip this point. Then have a knowledge of pedagogy or andragogy. When I say pedagogy, it is actually referring to the teaching methodologies used for children. What is the appropriate way of teaching children? And the students who are joining us in first year, actually they are adolescents, and those strategies can be helpful. But a student who is in second year or third year or final year, maybe he has crossed the age of 18 years, he comes as an adult to the class, the focus is different, the interest is different, the goal is different, or you must pay attention to what are the learning principles for adults, how to teach adults. So the knowledge of pedagogy, knowledge of andragogy, both are essential for the teacher. Subject matter knowledge is precondition. In addition to that, the person must have the knowledge of how to plan teaching, how to organize the teaching. That means how to schedule various activities, how to develop the various resources which are needed to implement the instruction, how to deliver instruction, how to evaluate instruction. So planning, organizing, implementing or delivering, and then evaluating. So these are the basis why I must know how to teach children, how to teach adults. And if I'm dealing with adolescents, I must be aware of how to deal with adolescents, because most of our students are adolescents. So, and at that stage, the person is undergoing stress and strain. He is under confusion whether he is a child, whether he is a adult. Is he going to be dependent for decision making on others, or he is going to take independent decision? His identity crises are there. And there's a lot of peer pressure at this stage. You must have seen that students who are with us at this stage, they are guided and directed by the peer groups. Peer pressure is there. And they have, I would say, the role models fixed for them. And many of them have the Bollywood heroes and heroines as their model. So there is a task for this teacher to understand that behavior, deal with their problems, and provide them guidance and counseling. So your communications should be such where you are not treating them as children, you are allowing them the freedom, you are respecting the individuality of the learner, and then giving him the needed independence, because he is entering into adulthood. So transition is there. So you need to capitalize on that, and accordingly your communication should be geared towards that. Flexibility and approach. Some people, maybe some teachers, they are very rigid in the approach. They go and they have planned a lecture, go to the class, very strict, very rigid. I have planned, so I am going to deliver the lecture. At times, you should be ready with the substitute also. Say, I would say lecture is one. You have given group discussion to your students. You ask them to prepare for a topic. But when you go to the class, they have not prepared the topic. They are not ready for group discussion. What to do? Are you going to shunt them out? Or are you going to use another approach to teach that same topic? So be prepared. Or say, for example, I have taken a PowerPoint, and we come across number of teachers these days who bring a PowerPoint, and if the LCD protector goes or the light goes, they say, sorry, I'll teach sometimes else. Because they don't have the knowledge, they cannot switch over to another mode. Flexibility in approaches, that you should be ready to shift and take up another approach to teaching that subject. अगर बच्चे नहीं पढ़ के आए, I am ready. I teach them the way I would like to. right? और एक मीडिया खराब हो गया तो क्या हुआ? The board is there, so you are versatile enough to use the board and explain everything and finish your class. Don't be dependent upon that. Or say, for example, I go to the class, I have fixed up, okay, this is the schedule I'm going to, but the students say, sir, आज ना half an hour पहले छोड़ दो. Are you flexible enough to do that? Not every time, but depending upon certain situations. Say, for example, I give you India-Pakistan match, hockey match was there. So everybody was there. आज तो देखना ही है. So students are not ready to sit in the class. So you finish your activities within 1 hour. You allow them their preferred activity, but you give them tasks which they have to complete in compensation to that activity. ये नहीं बोल रही हूँ छोड़ दीजिए simply, but you give another task to them whereby they do some task in lieu of the class which you have left. So flexibility in. Then be free from biases and prejudices. आज तो when I enter the class, I go with the bias. Bias है, कुछ नहीं आता. I have perception about the students, है ना? I go with the notion they are here only to waste their time. They are here only to listen, listen, listen. They'll not reply. Go with the bias. School में तो कुछ सीखा ही नहीं. They go with the. They don't know anything. They are empty vessels. Never ever take this stance when you have to teach a class. Never be biased towards caste, creed, color, or gender. Always go with open mind. You raise questions, students may answer it wrongly. They may have incorrect assumptions. They are here with incorrect knowledge, but they bring some knowledge, skills, and attitude to the class. So treat your students with respect. Give them respect. In turn, you'll earn the respect. And you must create a rapport with your students. Okay? So, if you are not biased, you are not prejudiced, you will treat them equally on equal footing, and your dealing with the student would be very nice, and you will be able to establish cordial relationships with your students, establish a rapport, and then your communication becomes very, very. Or communication leads to rapport building. Rapport building leads to greater understanding. Right? So these are some of the factors related to the teacher. We'll be discussing them in detail when we go to oral communication class. Now I come to message related factors. As a teacher, you are not communicating without a purpose. There is a purpose which you want to fulfill. There are definite instructional objectives which you would like to achieve. So as a teacher, when you are designing the message, you must be clear of what is it that my student will be able to do. And now every institution who is applying for accreditation is writing course outcome. Course outcomes, when you write, actually is the outcome of every topic you are combining. So for every topic, you should know what a student will be able to do. So if you know that, you'll be able to select the content, select appropriate methods and evaluation technique. And if you select appropriate method and media and evaluation, you remain effective. Your communication will be effective. Be properly sequenced. I simply say there is logical sequencing, there is psychological sequencing. Logical sequencing refers to the inbuilt hierarchy within the subject. Give you one example: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. We teach in the same sequence. Likewise, if I am going to teach a subject, there is inbuilt hierarchy. Which particular topic should come first, which next. Don't buy the syllabus. Try to apply your mind in which sequence the topics are to be taught. And within a topic, what kind of sequencing needs to be done. Second, psychological sequence: easy to difficult, known to unknown, simple to complex, concrete to abstract. So you try to arrange the content matter following these logical and psychological principles. Then use language comprehensible to the learners. This point I have already made, that if your students desire that you should speak a mixed language, do it for the sake of the student. If he or she understands the subject, he or she will be able to express it. If he doesn't understand, he'll not never be able to express it. So there's no harm in enabling the learner to comprehend by using a mixed language. Okay, you are from which college? Okay, where is it? Barwala. Okay. Now the question is, the students who are joining us in the college, they are from Hindi medium of instruction, and suddenly there is a change in the medium of instruction. So initially, to begin with, the simple things, maybe you are using English, but the complex things you are trying to explain in Hindi, try to always use a mix rather than simply using Hindi. And then, because all technical terminology, they are going to write it also, and it is easy to understand technical terminology in English rather than Hindi. So try to have a balance between the two, and gradually, whether this problem persists for a period of 1 year, 2 years, or all the 3 years. 1 year. Maybe the initial teething problems are there because it is new for them. So give them the time, 1 month, 2 months to settle down, and then you can use English more frequently. Hanji. Okay. Now, what is happening, because there are differentials in their previous knowledge and they don't have the mastery over the language. So many of the institutions now have started bridge courses or remedial classes for the student. Say a student who's not good in mathematics, he goes for an additional math class, or there is a bridge course available and he tries to clear that and then continue with the classwork also. Likewise, if we think that our students are not good in language, the English, then what we can do is some extra coaching for them. We plan certain modules, or we have certain recorded lectures which we give to them. They can view at home and then learn that language. Right? So you have to find out the modalities. Now the technology can be very efficiently used. Somebody can record 15 to 20 lectures on the language, put it on the website of the institute. Student have an access to that, and student can see that, and then maybe every week you have only one session of 1.5 hours or 2 hours where you try to take up the difficulties of the student and then try to satisfy them. So this modality can be used, or you can prepare self-learning materials for the students, or you can refer them to the bbc.co.uk, where you can have number of things available with respect to the language, so they can learn. Or you try to generate interaction within the class so that their hesitation to use the languages oh, eliminated. So try to generate interaction, maybe allow them to express themselves in Hindi or English, and when they start speaking, within due course of time, they'll be able to understand. So, Hanji, you do that. Then integrate relevant exercises for giving practice. So message, if say for example you are dealing with derivations, equations, numerical problem solving, when you remain effective, when you allow the student to practice. Or you are teaching skill learning, that intellectual skill you are trying, how to draw graphs, how to interpret graphs, how to solve problems, then you must give them adequate practice. Or say writing a program. it is a skill. Or you give them complex problem and find a solution. That problem solving ability can be developed among the students by allowing them to solve number of problems related to the world of work, and then you will remain effective. Make generous use of examples and non-examples. We give examples, but many of us do not give non-examples. Now, say for example, if you are dealing with the laws, the principles in a particular discipline, tell them the situation where the law is applicable, tell them the situation where the law is not applicable, so that they have clear-cut idea under what situation or what circumstances the law is applicable and the situation where the law is not applicable. Then the understanding will be more. So message related principles. Then we have methods and media related principles. So communication, classroom communication would be effective when the teacher is able to make use of appropriate methods and media. Now when I say methods, you know the range. We have lecture method, which is large group method. We have large number of small group methods like group discussion, seminars, brainstorming, case studies, role play, problem-based learning, project-based learning, and then we have tutorials, then we have individualized methods of instruction. As a teacher, try to know the objectives of your topic. Try to know the nature of content of communication. Then decide whether I need to use only lecture method. हम तो सारी चीजों के लिए lecture method use करते हैं. But lecture method is efficient only for giving information, for increasing remembering and understanding ability. But if you really want to develop higher level abilities of ability to analyze, ability to evaluate, ability to create, then you need to use problem-based learning, project-based learning, case study method, or if you really want to develop creativity among your students, then you must use the brainstorming method and project method, which gives a leverage to the students to innovate, to come out with original solutions to the problem. So methods must be, if your content is that you want to develop interpersonal skills and you use lecture method, you will never be able to develop interpersonal skills. That means you must identify few activities which are to be taken in groups or teams may be constituted. When the people interact in teams, they develop interpersonal skills, they also develop the teamwork skills. होता है ऐसा? They improve their communication. Or you can have a role play whereby you can make a person to understand the feeling that exists within the other individual. Ask one person to act as a manager, one person to act as a customer. And ask the customer to act as a manager and manager to act as a customer. So you can make them understand each other's feelings, the behavior and the attitude. So a common understanding of the roles can be developed. So teacher needs to identify the appropriate method for achieving the objectives. If you are able to achieve the objectives, that means your communication has been effective. ठीक है? मीडिया, अब देखिए मैं दिखाना चाह रही हूँ कि इंक्लाइंड प्लेन है, इंक्लाइंड प्लेन पे आप कुछ रखते हो तो नीचे आ रहा है, ऐसा ही होता है. एक तो बोलती हूँ मैं, the same thing can be shown very easily with the help of animation. दिखा सकती हूँ, है ना? इंक्लाइंड प्लेन दिखा सकती हूँ, बॉल वहां से रोल कर सकती है, गाड़ी रोल कर सकती है, कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. और आई कैन शो, अब आप उत्तराखंड की इतनी बात करते हो, उत्तराखंड के कुछ क्लिपिंग्स, वीडियो क्लिपिंग्स यू कैन शो टू द स्टूडेंट. अभी आपकी जो बिल्डिंग 17 में जल गई और नीचे ढह गई, If that incident you are narrating and you are showing that incident with the help of the clippings, communication will be more effective. So appropriate use of media along with the verbal explanation would be more effective than simply giving an explanation of the incident or the case. So try to select appropriate media for transferring the message to the student. Okay? Then use variety of methods and media. Why there is need? Because you want to achieve different types of objective. Knowledge भी बढ़ानी है, skill भी बढ़ानी है, attitudes में भी change लानी है. So, say for example, if you want to actually develop skills, real things, there is no substitute. Real machinery, real equipment, real tools can be used in the class. If you really want to bring a change in the attitudes, role play, then video films, they can be a better option. So depending upon the objectives you want to achieve, use variety because students are different. Some would learn when they listen, others would learn when they'll see the things, others will learn when they do the things. So make use of combination of methods and media. And the quality of media should be good. मैं वीडियो फिल्म तो लेके आई 60 की बनी हुई ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में, आज दिखा रही हूँ उसको. Nobody is interested in seeing a black and white film because now you have all colored and digital good quality media is available. So think over. आज अगर आप मैं मोशन पिक्चर लेके आऊँ एंड मोशन पिक्चर प्रोजेक्टर से चला के शुरू कर दूँ, you will say मैम पहले इसको चेंज कर लो. So, or maybe the audio is not good, so one has to think of. आप जैसे पावर पॉइंट लेके आते हैं, लोग काफी सारे लेके आते हैं, पहली लाइन रेड कलर में, दूसरी ग्रीन कलर में, तीसरी ब्लू कलर में, and it's such a jumble of colors and you get irritated what the person has done. There are certain principles which you need to take into account while making PowerPoint presentations, so those need to be taken into account. Then integrate media in teaching learning. It is very, very important. Most of us use media for the sake of media. And we have become so dependent upon media. कोई कह रही थी PowerPoint चला गया, so class is off today. We'll not continue with the class, we'll continue with the class tomorrow. No. The teaching learning में media का जो role है, that cannot ever substitute a teacher. बट आप यूज कैसे करते हो? देखो वीडियो फिल्म लेके जाते हैं लोग, कहते हैं चलो आज वीडियो फिल्म लगा दो हाफ एन आवर की, बस फिर बच्चों को छोड़ दो, दे हैव लर्न द टॉपिक. नहीं, बिफोर यू इंटीग्रेट वीडियो मीन्स you prepare yourself. After viewing the video, what are the things the students are going to learn? Pose 10 questions on that media. Give that list to the student. Make them focused. This is what they have to observe when they view the video. They should try to find answers to these questions. Then at the end of the video screening, you have a small group discussion taking place in the class. Then ask different groups to answer those questions. Then supplement the answers given by the student. That is how this is integration of media in teaching learning rather than simply using the media for the sake of media. आज लोग PowerPoint से जो लिखा है वही पढ़ते चले जाते हैं, and that is what they have delivered an effective lecture. No, that is not media. That is not integration of media. So if your selection is appropriate, the use of method and media is appropriate, then your communication will be effective and you'll be able to achieve your objectives. Last is that the learning environment which you create in the classroom has to be congenial and conducive to effective communication. अब देखिए, when we are sitting in a class, if I am going to organize a group discussion, I cannot have row-wise arrangement in the class. Group discussion requires that I have a semi-circular kind of arrangement for different groups or a circular arrangement for a group to interact among themselves. That is the right way of arranging the class. Now, if I have, like, I have 120 chairs here in ETB studio. 120 chairs are jam-packed house. I have no place to move around. So when I give a task to my class, I cannot move in between. The communication becomes ineffective. I'm not able to see who is the person who is sitting on the last chair in the class. The learning environment is not conducive to effective communication, right? If I'm not audible because there is no public address system in the class, my communication, though it may be effective, but becomes ineffective due to non-availability of public address system in the class where I have to address 120 students. Hota hai sir? I create an environment where I am the know-all. I don't allow you to express yourself. मैं आपको मौका ही नहीं देती हूँ बोलने का. Learning environment, because communication is two-way, communication is interactive. Unless and until you create that kind of environment, communication will be ineffective. First and foremost, आज we have class size as 60, 80, 120. Overcrowded class. 30 is the minimum size with which you can interact easily. You can keep track of what is going on in the class, right? If you really want to interact. Yes, you can interact, simply throw information with thousands and thousands with the help of media. But that may not be as effective if you really want to achieve certain objectives. So classes should not be overcrowded. Proper seating arrangement for the class. I said, say there is a furniture. I'll just give one example. We had gone to one institution where the benches were there, wooden benches. A student has to sit for 6 hours on that bench, which is very hard. And after 2 hours, you feel like that you should get up and move out of this class because the seat is not very comfortable. I have seen few institutions where the level of the furniture is that of a school children. Itna low level pe hai. And you are dealing with adolescents and they cannot sit comfortably on that stool because itna niche banaya hua hai usko bachchon jaise wo bane hue hain table and chair. When the student is not comfortable, there is internal noise, he is either tired or is not able to sit, then concentration wavers. He is distracted. He will not be able to listen to you and so communication becomes ineffective. आप जितने मर्जी effective बोले चाहिए, communication on the whole will be ineffective. होता है ऐसा? So proper seating arrangement is what is needed. Build rapport with the student. This I have dealt with when dealt with teacher-related factors, that a teacher must treat the student and give due respect to the individuality of the student. कभी-कभी आप informally भी बच्चे से उसका हालचाल पूछिए, जरूरी नहीं है सिर्फ क्लास में उसका क्या आता है क्या नहीं आता. But if you see that the person is not able to attend the class for 3 days, 4 days, he has been missing, how many of you are really bothered that for the past 4 days the student was not? Kabhi puchiye, janiye what kind of difficulty he experienced when he is not able to answer the question in the class. Try to have some informal dealing with the student also, and the more you show concern about the student, the better will be the rapport between the teacher and the student. To exchange pleasantries, try to have the knowledge of your students, try to ask about academic, personals, general welfare of the student, and then try to deal with their academic problems. Personal इसलिए नहीं बोल रही हूँ because कहीं if I'm not a trained guidance and counseling person, I may do a harm rather than helping out the student. So try to refrain yourself, only deal to the with the problems which are within your purview. Encourage cooperation and healthy competition among students. अब देखिए cooperation क्यों? Because if they work in teams, you try to create teams, you try to fix up individual responsibility, make them accountable for their individual responsibility, then there will be good interaction among the students also. Healthy competition, only task related, never be biased, subjective when you are rewarding, appreciating. So competition and that should be healthy, and you should try to encourage cooperation among your student. Provide feedback. Teacher needs to obtain the feedback from the audience by looking at them, by observing them keenly about their posture, head nods, facial expression, their interaction, then verbal interaction which takes place when you pose a question, give them tasks, you try to obtain feedback. And then your role is to provide feedback to the audience. That means whether they are right or wrong. Always give task related feedback. Never try to give a generalized kind of, नहीं अच्छा किया. भाई अच्छा किया means what part of the answer was अच्छा, what part of the answer was not good. Tell them exactly where they have faulted, and then it has to be immediate. Say the person has given a right answer. After 3 months, you tell him the question you posed on that day was excellent. भाई उसी समय क्यों नहीं बोल दिया? You should have given that feedback to the student. It would have meaning. ठीक है? और या when you distribute the answer scripts और बच्चे को नंबर बहुत अच्छे आए, तो उसी समय उसको स्माइल कीजिए, encourage कीजिए, reward कीजिए, appreciate कीजिए, rather than doing it later 1 month or 2 months. Provide feedback. So immediate feedback has meaning. So immediate feedback must flow to the student. Then it has to be very specific and objective. Biased नहीं. एक बच्चे ने गलत जवाब दिया, वो आपको अच्छा लगता है, उसको तो कुछ नहीं बोला, सिट डाउन बोल दिया. दूसरा बच्चा पसंद नहीं है, उसको आपने एक पूरा लेक्चर दे दिया कि कुछ पढ़ते नहीं हो, आते नहीं हो. So that should not happen in the class. Remain objective. Encourage experimentation. Where the communication will be open, where you allow your students to experiment with ideas, experiment with novel things. अब आपने सवाल पूछा, उसने बहुत ही कुछ अलग सा आंसर दे दिया, ठीक है? अब don't try to discourage the child. Ask, try to probe why he has given this answer. What was at the back of his mind? So if you allow the students to experiment with new ideas, novel thoughts, then only creativity would develop. And जितनी ज़्यादा experimentation आप allow करेंगे, अगर suppose करो उसने कुछ नया कुछ बोल दिया और आपने उसको curb कर दिया, उसको discourage कर दिया, then the person will not ever open up the mouth in class. Communication तो ineffective हो गई ना. You have to generate interaction between the teacher and the student, among the student. So allow that. Provide reinforcement. This point is taken up with the feedback that when you are providing knowledge of results, appreciate, praise, reward the student so that he tries to show the desired behavior again. So you try to strengthen the connection between the stimulus and response. आप क्वेश्चन पूछते हो, वो अच्छा आंसर आया, उसी समय उसको अप्रिशिएट किया. नेक्स्ट टाइम व्हेन यू पोज अ क्वेश्चन, स्टूडेंट ट्राइज टू रेज द हैंड एंड आंसर द क्वेश्चन. तो कम्युनिकेशन आपकी क्या हुई? ओपन हो गई, टू वे हो गई, इंटरेक्टिव हो गया, एंड यू रिमेन इफेक्टिव. So you will be able to design subsequent messages as per the requirements of the audience. So friends, these are some of the variables. एक ये भी आप पढ़ सकते हो, provide non-threatening environment. बच्चा क्लास में क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है, so I say sit down. बच्चे ने गलत आंसर दे दिया, I try to punish that child, so I am creating a threatening environment. Or every day, without making any prior announcement, I say today will be the test. ये आप unnecessarily anxiety बढ़ा रहे हो बच्चों में. So create an environment which is non-threatening, where the students are freely able to express themselves, share their problems, share their apprehensions, and supplement the information. अगर उनको लगता है मैंने नेट पे पढ़ा था, मैम जो बोल रही हैं वो गलत है, आप गलत बोल गए, नॉट योर इंटेंशन बट अनइंटेंशनली कुछ गलत निकल गया, बच्चे ने समझ लिया, बट ही इज नॉट रेडी टू, बिकॉज यू आर सच अ स्ट्रिक्ट अथॉरिटेरियन पर्सन हु विल नॉट लिसन टू द स्टूडेंट. तो वो खड़ा होके ये नहीं बोलेगा कि मैम आपने गलत बोल दिया, तो झगड़ा हो जाएगा. Try to have an attitude where student can question your thinking, student can question your explanation and raise question. मैं ये नहीं कह रही गलत पढ़ाओ. I say go fully prepared with your lecture and allow the students to raise questions so that they can challenge. If that kind of environment you can generate in the class, classroom communication will be more effective and you will be able to do justice to the role you have been assigned to. So friends, in nutshell, teacher related, student related, message related, and learning environment and method and media related factors, they affect the effectiveness of classroom communication. Pay attention to these factors. Many things are within your control. So if you take account of these principles, try to integrate these into while you are planning and managing communication in the classroom, the communication will remain effective. So thank you very much for your participation. If any one of the centers has question, welcome. So over to the centers, please. Any question from ETV studio? None. Any question from the network centers, RK, G, IT, BIT? Hanji, any question, ma'am? Ji, ma'am. Hanji, please go ahead, ma'am. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Fine. Hanji. Ji. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly, certainly. When you talk in terms of communication skills, uh, maybe there is hesitation on the part of number of students. So what you do first in the class, oral questioning, which you should encourage. You should try to pose as many questions to the students and encourage them to answer either in Hindi or in English. Whatever language they can answer, allow them to answer, right? Then you may try to allow them to listen to the experts. If you are inviting certain experts for delivering expert lectures, assign the responsibility to some of the students to prepare a gist of that and then share that gist with the class the next day. Another thing which you can, most important learning of yesterday, that is Millie. So when you have class in the morning, you go to the class. So if there are say 60 students, each student will get a chance for one day. 60 classes you are going to engage, 60 students are there. So assign this duty to the student, Millie, that most important learning of yesterday. The student comes in front of the class, he tries to express what he learned yesterday, maybe right or wrong, You have only to encourage that they come and share with them. Another thing, like in the schools, we have a system of where the small child is asked to go through the headlines of the newspaper and बच्चे की ड्यूटी लग जाती है. So मैं वो न्यूज़पेपर तो नहीं बोलूंगी. You have journals in the library coming in. So a teacher, if keeps track of the journals which come in a subject matter, then he tries to assign a duty of say 6 to 10 students, because there are 10 to 12 articles coming in. So you can identify if there are say five journals I am receiving. So I assign 12 students to one journal. So I ask them to keep track of what is the latest article which has come up. So they take care of 12. They have to keep track of one journal issue. So they go through the journal, they acquire the mastery over one journal article. And then they share the findings of that or the article with the class. So 60 students, they are reading journal articles, they are sharing that knowledge, but this knowledge maybe you are not using for evaluating, just encouraging and honing their communication skills. So here their understanding of the subject matter would develop, latest knowledge they'll acquire, at the same time ability to analyze, ability to communicate, they'll acquire with the help of this. Then I would say if you are having certain practical classes you are holding, at the end of the practical class also, the students can be invited to share what they have learned on the same day after the practical class. Then students may be allowed to informally interact with the teacher. आप इतने एक रेपो बनाइए कि the student is free to come and share his thoughts, share his problems with you as a teacher. तो एक रेपो बनने के बाद students hesitation to express themselves he'll be able or she'll be able to overcome. Then इसके अलावा मैं एक एग्जांपल आपको दे सकती हूँ. One of the institutions, they have kept Wednesday as an activity day for the students of the Department of Architecture. तो हर बच्चे को आके 2 घंटे का 3 घंटे का उनका प्रोग्राम होता है. So every student gets a chance to come on the stage. अगर वो सब्जेक्ट रिलेटेड कुछ बोलना चाहता है वो कर सकता है, अगर वो पोएम रेसाइट करना चाहता है वो कर सकता है, अ पर्सन वुड लाइक टू मिमिक वो कर सकता है. कुछ ना कुछ बच्चे को आके करना पड़ता है ऑन द स्टेज. सो दे हैव केप्ट एट अ डिग्री लेवल 2.5 hours एक्टिविटी. सो पीपल ओपन अप. फिर एक और हो सकता है कि जैसे आपने कहा कि कुछ बच्चे, तो अगर आप उनकी एक टीम बना दीजिए where you have 1 or 2 who are very good orators, 1 or 2 who are independent learners. तो उसके लिए आपके पास नॉलेज होना जरूरी है कि कौन कौन से बच्चों की ग्रुपिंग करनी है. So if you group them in 6 to 8 students and assign them tasks where they have the opportunity to learn from each other, peer learning takes place. And gradually you will see a student who is not able to speak in the class in front of the whole class maybe is a very vocal person in a small group. So try to identify whether they can speak in a small group or in a large group. तो जहाँ पे अब अगर स्मॉल ग्रुप में वो ओपन अप हो जाता है तो वो नेचुरली धीरे धीरे वो लार्ज ग्रुप के सामने भी आ जाएगा. और एक और चीज बोलूंगी कि इसके साथ साथ आप क्या कर सकते हैं कि इनको सम ऑफ द स्टूडेंट आइडेंटिफाई देयर पोटेंशियलिटी. maybe he is not a good orator but he is a very good problem solver. तो जब आप प्रॉब्लम देते हैं क्लास में, ask him to come to the board, explain that. वो प्रॉब्लम करा देगा, वैसे शायद नहीं बोल पाएगा. So ask them to participate in these kinds of activities. For the time being, I think so many alternatives are coming to my mind. So we can interact again. Ma'am, are you satisfied? जी मैम. So there can be number of alternatives depending upon the situation, depending upon the subject you are teaching, but you have to break their hesitation. Hanji. Hi. Hanji. Okay. Hanji. Hmm. नहीं नहीं ओके ओके इसमें आप क्या कर सकते हो फर्स्ट मेक देम ग्रुप्स लाइक 4 or 5 एंड जो अच्छा नेगोशिएटर है let the other person just observe a good negotiator and then ask him to identify how he negotiated उसको इसको उसको ऑब्जर्व करने दीजिए एनालाइज करने दीजिए एंड देन आस्क हिम टू स्पीक तो वो धीरे धीरे वो सीख जाएगा सो अलाउ हिम टू ऑब्जर्व द गुड एग्जाम्पल्स देन एनालाइज देन ही शुड बी अलाउड टू नेगोशिएट हाँ जी हाँ जी गुड आफ्टरनून थैंक यू सर जी हाँ जी हाँ जी हाँ जी ऐसा है कि when we say formal discussions so anything which is related to topic the subject you are teaching where you give a structure and there is a definite outcome of that discussion is formal ठीक है जी इनफॉर्मल डिस्कशन की जब बात करते हैं तो उसमें ऐसे ऐसे फॉर एग्जांपल आई एम गोइंग टू ऑर्गेनाइज I am going to organize a seminar in the department and I want to invite an expert. I have an informal discussion with the students. Okay, these are the topics which I have selected for seminars to be presented during the semester. And you discuss among yourself and let me know in what priority I should go about organizing these seminars. Informal discussion I have with them. When I try to schedule the tests for my students, I don't give up the timings. I don't say I fix up this date on which the class test will be held. I just throw this question to my student in the class. I say, okay, we are going to have 2 class tests during the semester and this is what we propose, 2 tests. You let us know whether these dates are convenient. They enter into informal discussion and we finalize the dates. I try to give assignments where I again have the students' opinion. I don't give them, okay, by this date you have to return. They try to give me, okay, ma'am, we have got 3 assignments for the other subjects and we have to complete 4 assignments during this week, which is will be very taxing for us. So can you give me 15 days, 20 days time to finish this assignment? So what is the harm in talking these issues? This is informal discussions with your students which is taking place. You are giving them independence, you are involving them in decision making, and you are actually capitalizing on the strengths of your students. And you are not making them as if they are here to receive, but they are here to participate. So otherwise also, when we have certain issues like sometimes we sit in the department, we talk to our students about the problems being faced in the hostel. So when the student is approaching me, not approaching, rather they are there in the class, sometimes I invite them, okay, when we have time for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just tell me, are you comfortable in the hostel? Informal discussion takes place. What kind of food you are getting? Are you satisfied with that? General question, general welfare, I have discussion with my student. Or I just ask them who is at home, because I have teachers who are coming to me for studies. So I just ask about the family. So I create a rapport between myself and the students. This is how I am generating. Formal to सारा जो class में आप करते हो structured way में, that is all formal discussions which you generate. So class में मैं क्या करती हूँ? Every class I keep 15 minutes and I give them a part of the topic where I ask the groups to discuss among. Say for example, I deal with human resource development and training methods. So HRD में, so I said okay, I had a session on training. So I said अभी आप सब training attend करते हो. Just within a group of 6 to 8, discuss what are the advantages and disadvantages of attending the training programs. अब वो बता देते हैं. Then I request each group to make a presentation on the board. So I have 4 or 5 groups working in the class. So I get lot many points. Then I summarize on my own. So every class I used to have 10 minutes discussion on some sub aspect of the program, or I try to have case studies, because management provides you leverage. You have number of case studies, you keep cases, students discuss among themselves again in a group activity, then they have discussion on that. So बहुत सारी आपकी, depending upon the subject you are teaching, you can generate formal discussions in the class. Okay, thank you. Any other question from the center? Thank you very much. Any other center would like to pose a question quickly, because I have already overshooted the time. So I think if there is no other question, I thank everyone and see you at 2 for the next session. Thank you very much. तो ये ना बजाओ भाई, हैं जी, यहाँ के ताली बजा दो या ना बजाओ.